It seems to be.
Yeah, it's Microsoft pixelated. That's what it is.
Gotcha. There we go.
Thanks.
No worries. All right, Owen, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Kelsey. Sorry, I was waiting for you to kick off the ceremony. But it's good to give the folks a couple of minutes afterwards. So thanks for joining us today for the AEM user group, part of a series. Today we're going to look at some advanced DAM capabilities, looking specifically at dynamic media, content automation. This touches on Adobe Sensei functionality across both of these, but also you should just be thinking content velocity, and we'll dive into that as well. Quick bit of intro about me and talking about content velocity. Borrowing from our friends at Adobe Stock, a picture of somewhere in the middle of the North Island of my home country of New Zealand. I grew up in Auckland, New Zealand, moved to the States at the beginning of the 2000s. Been with Adobe since the acquisition of Day Software in 2010. That's where AEM came from, Day Communique. And I try to get home at least once a year to visit. This picture here, I have still not seen kiwi crossing at night. That's a kiwi as opposed to a kiwi fruit, which is what you guys call kiwi and we call kiwi fruit, at night or day. But for the movie buffs amongst you, the middle of the North Island, there are 3 volcanoes surrounding a large lake that used to be a volcano. One of the largest eruptions ever recorded, but the volcano you're looking at here, if you're a film buff, you probably know better as Mount Doom, or as we call it, Ngarahoe. So diving into some of the content, and again, this is interactive. It's not a lecture by any stretch. So if you do have questions, either feel free to speak up or place them in the chat. And Kelsey, if you could please let me know if there's any correspondence in the chat from the team on the call. So looking at the overall strategy for Adobe, and again, if you spent time at Summit, you would have seen this driven home, delivering personalized experiences. Now, when we get into Adobe Experience Manager, AEM, and assets, that's all driven by a strategy. What are we trying to do? Is it a campaign, product shoot, product launch, those kind of things? Content orchestration is really where Adobe Experience Manager assets, with that functionality that dynamic media, content automation, and Adobe Sensei provide, gives the content owners, whether it's B2B, B2C, any channel, it gives them the content to build the experiences manually or automatically they need for that experience delivery in an omni-channel mechanism. And these have to be tightly aligned. Content chaos is typically one of the biggest challenges. 80% of customers want personalized content. I'd say realistically, it's larger than that. Looking at what Adobe customers and what your specific customers are looking for. And they want that not only personalized content and experiences, but on a global scale. And sourcing that content is one of their biggest challenges. 70% of creative time spent on quote unquote project management, or just finding the assets they need to build out these experiences. Customer I worked with a few years back, we did a global survey with them. They were geographically distributed, content silos, not much governance, but the key aspect that came away there was that 80% of their time was spent actually finding the assets they would be using to work with. So content velocity, again, always keep that front of mind, leveraging the tools that you have, tools that are available, along with artificial intelligence to help. Now, when we look at the bigger picture here, that management aspect, the strategy, we acquired Workfront a year or so ago. That helps remove a lot of the redundancy around that strategy, but we're still needing to drive that content orchestration and delivery. So keeping the likes of Workfront at the back of your mind, this is where a lot of customers are at. Maybe they've got the ability to do content orchestration and deliver the appropriate experience with the appropriate assets provided, but only partial alignment to strategy. Flipping that around, having the strategy and the orchestration, but no means to deliver that personalized content in an omni-channel manner in real time with automation. So that's part of what's missing for a lot of customers as well. You need to be able to tie this together. And when we look at these 3 pillars here, strategy, content orchestration, experience delivery. We're focusing on content orchestration today, right? But of course, the people and process are part of that. So when you're looking at interactions between the creative team and how they may be leveraging or contributing to the digital assets required for these experiences to be delivered, that's where something like Workfront comes into play, and out-of-box functionality that you can install directly on Creative Cloud like Adobe Asset Link, which ties Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and XD directly into AEM assets with orchestration. And again, experience delivery, it may be AEM web pages, it could be Target, it could be non-Adobe, fully headless, IoT devices, call centers. You need to be able to have the appropriate content in those experiences, personalized in real time for the audience. So that's where Adobe comes to unify all this together: work management, asset management, and delivery. So this we used to title as a vision slide, but this is in reality what we can deliver today. Again, today we're focusing specifically on AEM assets, but it's an integral ecosystem. Okay, we need to plan out what's being delivered, engage with the creatives, internal and external. And again, Adobe Asset Link helps them work directly within Adobe Experience Manager, where the experiences may be delivered from into this omni-channel mechanism. We need to measure, optimize, inform, and conceptualize along the way. So the tools that are available to the creatives, XD, the familiar creative tools, all come into play here. So without spending too much time on the Workfront aspects, there's other great content around that we can point you to there around the better together story of Workfront, assets, Creative Cloud. That's really where that strategy comes into play, providing tasks to the creatives. What we're looking at today is driven by that, because where are we getting this great content from to build out our experiences? Well, it's static imagery, it's moving video assets. It could be audio files, any type of 3D, AR, VR, literally anything that is a binary file with associated metadata can be considered an asset. And Creative Cloud is one of the prime sources, but there's also plenty of other solutions that provide assets that your customers will be using on a day-to-day basis, and they need to be in one consolidated source of truth with appropriate governance and the ability for people to find them and leverage them automatically, manually across the channels. So really what we're focusing on today is content velocity and impact driven by AEM assets. So some of the key tenets that I've already spoken to: centralizing content into a single source of truth. So regardless of where the assets are coming from, historically it may have been siloed network shares, or maybe there's some assets that are stored in native Creative Cloud storage, or my desktop, or my phone, or at an agency. Consolidate them all down, leverage the power of AEM asset for that enterprise-wide search, and again, with appropriate governance, so I can only see and use what I have as part of my user group permission to do so. I shouldn't need to know where an asset is. These are, damn basics. I should just be able to type keywords, get a set of search results, filter based on the facets that are available, create a smart collection, that kind of functionality. There's strong, compelling business value there. As I mentioned before from that customer example, if you can save hours upon hours of searching for an asset, you can spend time being creative with them. So what we're looking to solve is this struggle. The opportunity is there and the tools are available to solve it. Peak content velocity. So minimizing the time and resources on repetitive content variation tasks, simplifying workflows, speeding the time to market, and devoting time to more work. So where a creative, for example, may spend a lot of time redoing a particular asset in a particular way based on the channel that's required. That could be a crop, it could be an asset type, the MIME type, or different aspects of that asset that is required for a channel. Print is a common one as well, taking that RGB image and turning it into a CMYK automatically. So automation is where we start to look at the DAM, AEM assets, not as a static repository, but it is a content generator for these channels automatically and making those assets available to use for the content owners, marketing teams, whomever it may be, across whatever channel they're delivering to. So this is the vision, and again, this is available today. So think about the time spent on a typical current content journey. Okay, the photographer loading in their photo shoot into a network drive. Someone then gets an email, they need to pick it up and move it into another area. Maybe work fronts in play. This could be all manual. Managing that, assembling the content together, delivering the content in an omni-channel mechanism, and ensuring it's personalized and we're collecting data on it. When you move across to the optimal here, creation and sourcing, bring everything into AEM assets, leverage the tool, artificial intelligence via Adobe Sensei, content automation, dynamic media. So single step content sourcing. This has been a key tenet of Day Communique in AEM all the way through, a single source of truth for any particular content node. And this cascades, of course, all the way through assets. So delivering the appropriate content to the appropriate end user or business, removing those manual tasks. And when we have a quick look at the evolution of the DAM, where we've come to today is what you can see here. AEM in the middle, we've got some brand new functionality we're calling content automation, giving assets users the ability to call Photoshop and Lightroom APIs directly in the cloud from AEM assets without having to go back to a creative. That again is to automate what would be typically repetitive content-driven tasks, maybe actions in Photoshop or automating toning of an image or straightening an image in Lightroom. Dynamic media, of course, providing the rich media experiences, the dynamic renditions based on the channel, the bandwidth, the screen size, the end user, or the channel. It could again just be an audio. Distribution and delivery. Of course, we don't expect it's always going to end up in an Adobe Experience Cloud channel, like a campaign or a target or an AEM. This could be headless delivery. It could be to your customer's embedded CMS system or campaign management software, literally anywhere. We've got the Assets HTTP API, which allows access to these assets in a RESTful manner. And of course, leveraging dynamic media that applies even more variety that's available, generated automatically. So moving through a couple of the key tenets here, and then we'll get into a demo. So mundane repetitive tasks. What we're talking about with content automation, when we look at the costs involved, okay, we're doing a logo replace on an image here. And this could be applied to a state logo or a football team, a photo shoot, anything where you're doing the same task. When you look at a typical creative time and rate, that can easily be costing thousands of dollars for something that can easily be automated, leveraging content automation, calling Photoshop and Lightroom APIs in the cloud. Okay, so there's an estimate there, number of assets, and that's a optimistic view of 5 minutes per asset spent. And this is someone that knows what they're doing, but that cost for that creative internally or externally could be spent better elsewhere. So just to reiterate what we're talking about here, content automation with Creative Cloud. This is available now to AEM as a cloud service assets users. It is not available to AEM 6.5 and managed services or on-prem. So this is available now. There is a license involved based on the processing done. Talk to your Adobe account execs if you need further information there. But what we're doing is, on top of dynamic media, we're just adding another layer of content generation above and beyond just looking at AEM assets as a static digital asset management repository. Okay, currently there are 7 actions that can be performed, and we'll have a look at those closer through the time today, and of course during a bit of a demo. Auto toning, auto straighten, those are the Lightroom ones. Presets from Lightroom, cutouts, masking, smart object replace, and Photoshop actions. An action is something that as a user in Photoshop, you do again and again. It might be a set of 6 or 12 steps that you go through on a particular image. You can save those as an action to easily within Photoshop redo it. But that still requires time for that image to be moved backwards and forwards through a workflow rather than automating that entire procedure. Okay, so this is just an example again of some of the functionalities leveraging the power of Photoshop and Lightroom, but in the cloud, called directly via APIs from AEM assets. Looking at the Photoshop actions again, this is where some creatives may have a large repository of existing actions they use, and they need to be able to leverage those at scale automatically as well. So these actions can be brought into Adobe Experience Manager assets and called on demand automatically or manually at any time on the assets that are available. So think about your specific customer uses, right? Whether you're a partner or a customer, what do you do with your assets, imagery, and when we're talking dynamic media video, that could use automation, repetitive tasks, even just something basic like touching up an image to give it the best color temperature. Or if you're in manufacturing or retail, how about the removal and replacement of the appropriate logos based on that brand or that state if you're in tourism? And as we use it, Adobe, creating multiple banners from disparate backgrounds and an overlay text using these Photoshop actions so that when we're looking at content velocity internally, or things like Adobe Summit that, again, we sadly had virtual again this year, we can leverage our own functionality. And this cascades into the dynamic media aspects as well when we're looking at intelligent asset optimization. So you may already be familiar in some ways with dynamic media. Okay, when you load assets in, we have static renditions, as we call them, created automatically. They're used maybe as thumbnails or as a sample PNG 72 DPI for a web page. When we're talking about additional processing with dynamic media and Adobe Sensei, that's where Smart Crop comes to play. It's not brand new, but it continues to be enhanced and learn as it goes. So again, we'll load one file in, could be an image or a video, and then based on the unlimited amount of crops you as content owners can specify, make those available on demand internally or for the appropriate channel, and it hones in on the focal point in area, whether it's a person or an object like this, and we'll see some of that as well. So before I go into a quick demo, and we're about 20 minutes past the hour, any questions so far about what you've seen or anyone that's using some of this functionality already?
Yeah, this is Raf. I got a question.
Sure.
Can we get that Creative Cloud automation in our sandbox environment? Is that something that's possible?
I believe, is that partner or customer?
It's partner.
Yes, you should be able to. Drop us a line. You should have the email addresses. Let me know your details, and then we can look into it and get back to you. But the short answer, I believe, is yes. There may be some caveats then, though, because it is a licensed and it does require processing in the cloud. Okay, well, let's dive into a bit of a demo. And again, the typical caveat, this is not an XD click-through. This is my cloud service sandbox running the latest AEM as a cloud service instance. So let's just quickly revisit where we're at. Again, not knowing how familiar everybody on the call is with AEM assets in general, we'll do a quick run through of some of the navigation, okay? So I'm in my familiar UI here. Because I'm licensed for the appropriate modules, I can see sites, assets, screens, commerce. We're going to spend the majority of our time in assets. And as you see, as I drill down, I've got some of what I've spoken to already, where I may have created manual or smart collections from search results to curate collections of assets together, so I don't need to look for the same assets again and again. Smart tag training, if I'm looking to further enhance what Adobe Sensei can provide when I'm loading in assets and then moderating the tags that are generated. I can train Sensei with familiar images or logos, that kind of thing. Okay, and shared links, analogous to Dropbox in a lot of ways. I can share a collection or an asset for download or just review directly from the AEM interface. So when we're looking in here, I've created a folder here, AEM AUGS, okay, for our user group. And I've already pre-populated some content in the video folder, and we're going to spend some time in the Smart Crop folder. Then we're going to have a look at content automation. And again, a quick recap, AEM assets, AEM in general, lives in a Java content repository. Easiest way to think about it, it's just a hierarchical folder structure with additional functionality, such as automated versioning and being able to access these different renditions we're talking about. But as far as a folder structure, it's analogous to a network file share or what you've got on your local PCs, laptops. Okay, so as I traverse through my folders here, this will reflect that as well. So what I'm going to do is, you might first notice that I've got some profiles applied here. Okay, now what that means is that for whatever assets I load in here, or any in child folders further down, I want specific processing applied. Now, in this case, I'm generating what we call the all renditions and a smart crop. In this folder for video, I'm leveraging my video processing profile for smart crop as well. Now, I've already preloaded the videos again, just in the interest of time, to shortcut some of the Sensei processing. But let's dive into this folder and have a look. Well, you can see I've already got an asset loaded in a couple of days ago, and I've published it. Before we get into that, why don't we just drag and drop some more content in and watch what happens in real time. So I've grabbed some content. I might as well just throw all of them in from Adobe stock. Again, talking about content velocity, ease of access to content, drag and drop. I can see there's an existing one already there with the kiwi fruit. So I'll just create a version of that. So these are uploading directly from my laptop into my AEM as a cloud service assets instance. And then the workflows behind the scenes will kick off and start extracting metadata, thumbnails, like I mentioned before, maybe applying metadata, giving us the information that was extant in these assets. And that's, again, coming back to a key tenet, is that the assets you ingest, work with the creatives and the people that are working internally and externally to create these assets for you, to apply keywords and names based on your requirements, profiles. Anything that's in the XMP metadata schema, including IPTC, Dublin Core, etc., is extracted, can be searchable and shown in the assets UI when we're looking at the assets themselves. Okay, so if I do a quick refresh here, I'll be able to see that, yep, okay, we've got thumbnails going. The processing's taking a little bit longer than you might normally see loading in content, because again, this is also being sent further into the cloud, quote unquote, to have maybe dynamic media processing based on image presets that I've configured, or smart crop processing. Again, I just named the folder smart crop because that's a profile that I want to apply to all the images I load into here. Okay, so is any questions at this stage? Anything new or questions about? And again, if not, that's fine. Feel free to post in the chat and we can have follow-up discussions after the fact. So some of these should hopefully have finished by now, fingers crossed. I know my kiwi fruit one has, so why don't we just have a look at that while we start. Click into the asset, I can see again, it was refreshed. So if I click into that asset and have a look at the timeline, I should be able to see versions from when I created it, published it, and then uploaded a new version. Similarly, when I'm looking at renditions, for those of you who currently leverage assets but do not have dynamic media configured, this is where you'll see some differences. Okay, I've got the ability to select from the groups of renditions that are available, or I can scroll down here and have a look. I've got my static renditions. Again, these are the ones that are physically generated when I upload. Dynamic renditions are the ones that we tell dynamic media specific parameters. If you're familiar with Scene 7, it's analogous to that, except we drive everything directly from AEM assets rather than loading into those Scene 7 servers. And I can see that different effects may have been applied. Okay. In this case, I mentioned before a CMYK print version. That's why the color looks a bit off on my RGB screen, or a responsive version that could be used potentially in an AEM core component. Similarly, I've got these crops that I'd configured. I've only got 3 or 4 or 5 crops here, but remember, you can have as many as you want. Squares, different aspect ratios. Now, one of the key things here, and it might not be so evident because we're looking at kiwi fruit, is that Sensei has attempted to hone in on that focal point of interest here. And another great aspect of leveraging dynamic media and smart crop with AI is once these assets have been published out and made available, not only can I include them in my AEM components, but I can reuse them anywhere. I can generate a URL to be used, pop that into a browser window, and reuse it anywhere. Third-party CMS. We also have what we call an asset selector that can be used to target AEM assets from a third-party CMS web page directly. Okay, so you've got content velocity there, you've got source of truth. So as you see here, it's a Scene 7 server, but this is what we call that dynamic media rendition. My Adobe stock URL that I used and that preset called the thin banner, the smart crop that I had generated. Okay. Similarly, alongside the URL, I can get an embed code and just copy and paste that into any URL, an HTML file. Okay, let's step back a bit and see how we're doing here. So again, it looks like everything's been rendered and the appropriate renditions created. So let's step back up a level to the Smart Crop folder. Select it and then go into Smart Crop. So this is where I can moderate the crops that were suggested by Sensei, right? I configure them in tools, assets, processing profiles for image and video. But here is where I can moderate what was suggested. Okay, so here's my Kiwi image that I love to use. You see it's honing in most cases on that Kiwi banner. And as we scroll through, and let's scroll through here, we can see all the other ones that are available and moderate as we will. Maybe this one I want to call out a little bit more of the mountaintop, etc., etc. And when we get to the Kia native alpine parrot in New Zealand, they're kleptomaniacs, by the way, don't park near them or they'll try to steal your windscreen wipers. Again, Sensei's done a great job in honing in on our friend here. Maybe we want to see a little bit more of his beak. You get the idea.
And
I
Owen,
can
we
save
actually,
any changes there that I've made. Sorry. Kelsey?
sorry to interrupt, Owen. We have a question in the chat.
Sure.
So I want to make sure we get to it. Will it also add meta and alt tags to images?
You can absolutely do that. That's we're getting to smart tags shortly, but any metadata that was part of those assets can be extracted. And why don't we just go straight into managing tags now then? Thank you, Kelsey. So I haven't applied any tags here manually, but you can see Sensei has generated a set. Similarly, when we're talking about metadata, I'll open up the image properties shortly so you can see where that information would reside and where it can be added. And you can absolutely create metadata profiles that, based on the folder I load into, for example, I can tag images or add metadata in a specific way. But I also have the ability to use, a focusonomy. Just type Kiwi and I've added a tag. So we may want to go through here and, Sensei isn't too bad. We continue to evolve that functionality. And of course, the more assets we load in, the better it gets. So it's identified New Zealand. May not look like a desert, but it is in fact our alpine desert. There's a symbol there. It recognizes a Kiwi. So et cetera, maybe we'll get rid of transportation, traffic, travel definitely in there. Maybe we don't want to call out the color aspects. But this again highlights how critical content velocity, managing and making available these different variants of assets and the ability to search by keywords. So if I do a search for anything here, I can automatically see in the search results any asset that matches those results. Okay. And again, I can continue to scroll through and moderate all those assets I just uploaded in a similar way. So the question about looking at metadata. Okay. So, well, let's come back and select my same kiwi fruit image. Open up the properties. I could have also clicked the eye there. So we see there's not a lot with this. Again, best practice would typically dictate in your real life scenarios that there are keywords and metadata already extant in the original Photoshop or Illustrator, the original asset, wherever it may be, and or enrich it as you go. So we've got a not very compelling file name here, but maybe someone should have called it kiwi fruit. Okay, and maybe we've got the tag. See, I've added kiwi in there already, and there should probably be an owner for it so we know who to contact. Is there any DRM applicable? Do we need to expire this asset at a particular date, etc.? Now you can see here what I mentioned before, the IPTC, camera data, any areas this may be referenced, i.e. on a page or elsewhere. And we also have the ability, when we're leveraging Adobe Analytics alongside AEM assets, to have image information cascaded directly back into AEM, so we can see where and how assets are performing on an individual manner, not necessarily just the web page that they are part of. So short answer is yes, you can absolutely apply via profiles, additional metadata, tagging alongside Sensei, and the folksonomy of tagging manually. So that covers a lot of the Sensei functionality and dynamic media. And again, if I didn't explicitly call out the dynamic media aspects of a static image, I did show you the smart crop version. But again, if I want to have a look at one of these ones here, maybe I need a print version for my illustrated book or InDesign, the responsive one. I can leverage this in an AEM component. I can make it available via a URL or responsive snippet, the same way I did with my smart crop down here. Okay, so I'm going to move over to smart crop as it pertains to video, and then we're going to have a look at content automation and a couple more slides and QA if you need to wrap up. So diving in here, again, these are the assets that I preloaded, 6 meg, 19 meg. It took a couple of minutes to process, but I wanted to make sure I had the end results here for our time today. So very similar to what you saw with Smart Crop on the static imagery that I loaded in during our demo then. But when we're talking about video, there's some key aspects of video that we want to look at. Okay, so we might have a high res, 19 meg QuickTime video. There's no way we're going to try or shouldn't try to load that as part of, let's say, a mobile phone experience on a native app or a web browser. We need to ensure that we've got the appropriate rendition. And this again is where loading in a single asset, single source of truth, making these published out and available from the dynamic media servers in the appropriate channel based on a component on an AEM page, a dynamic media component, or to any third-party Adobe or non-Adobe channel. Again, we've got the ability to surface these assets any way, and that any way you need, and that includes any of the encodes or the renditions that have been generated. Okay, so we can see here we've got thumbnails that have been generated. Great for a placeholder if you want someone to click on a video and call out a specific area there. The original rendition and the specific encodes based on bandwidth, image size, those kind of things. But wait, there's more. When we talk about smart crop specifically, this is where we've got the ability, again, from that same video. Let's have a look at it. I've got my smart crop video, which is the processing profile I had specified. So if I click on that, I can still see, well, here's my video. Let's click play and see what happens. Again, I've got the ability to copy a URL or embed this video anywhere I need. Now, This could be great when you're looking at third-party rendering for video, or again, third-party CMS. The AEM core components and the dynamic media components know by default and are configurable to respect and be able to leverage any of the different viewers and renditions that you've configured. Okay, so let's play this. And then as I drag and drop, you'll see the image is changing. It's showing portrait there, but it's keeping focus on that skier. I've also got a square rendition, and I've got my regular 16:9. Okay, so in real time, let's say I was on the L downtown Chicago. This is a much more pleasurable viewing experience looking at a portrait video, but keeping an eye on the focal point than looking at a widescreen video that's maybe it's just cropped into that experience, but at the same time, we definitely don't want a 19 meg video at a large pixel size and bandwidth requirement being generated on our mobile device. So that's the power of Smart Crop. When we come to video, you can configure additional crops just like you can for image smart crops. So moving back into our assets, we're going to have a look at content automation. So a quick revisit on content automation. You've just seen how dynamic media can take that single source of truth asset, an image or a video, generate not only the static renditions that could be used like we do in AEM here, the static thumbnails, so we can see those image renditions, the dynamic renditions that are available from the dynamic media servers for whatever channel we may need. Further to that, we had Smart Crop. So not only the best quality image or video based on the channel I'm in, but Smart Crop via Adobe Sensei honing in on the specific focal area without the end user or the content author having to do anything. And again, these are moderatable via the UI as you saw. So that's part of what we consider this dynamic generation. It's not a static repository. It's an area to generate new content. So let's take a look at a couple of these, and we'll just bulk load some content in the same way that I did previously. Now, again, I configure these profiles. Let's just take a subset of these instead of trying to throw them all at it. And I'll grab some of the ones that we do use as examples in content automation. Okay, so we'll load these into Autotone, and then we'll step over to one of the Photoshop presets that I have configured here. Step back up through the breadcrumbs, maybe image cutout. Similarly, let's drag and drop those ones on. Now, you'll notice again, one of the benefits of AEM as a cloud service is the speed of processing. I'm uploading directly from my MacBook into my cloud instance, which I don't know where it is. I assume it's on Azure somewhere in one of the US zones, but you could see how fast not only it was loading it up, but then on the back end, the asynchronous processing, microservice driven via the asset processing that is available. If you're familiar with the old school way of doing it via AEM 6.5 and the DAM update asset workflow, this is all happening alongside. So it doesn't impact the performance of the AEM author and the content authors there. So we had a look at image cutout. Why don't we have a look at image mask as well? And I'll just drop these few ones in there. Last but not least, let's bounce back to auto straighten and just see what comes up with a couple of our New Zealand assets. Okay, where do we start? I think it was auto tone. So some of these are still processing. Okay, remember it's still doing these dynamic renderings, etc. And depending on my configuration, you'll see here I've got an output folder. You don't have to specify an output folder for each of these actions. You could specify a single output folder, or without an output folder, any of the content automation renditions that are generated are then available as renditions alongside the dynamic media smart crop as we would normally see. Okay, so if we have a look in here, maybe there's not much to go on. Maybe they were pretty straight already, but it's been processing them in the background and continues to do so on the auto tone, I should say. How about we have a look at image cutout and see what's happening here? So some of these are finished. Again, I've got my familiar New Zealand and sample content automation Adobe stock assets. Click into output. What have we got here? Well, we can see this has potentially saved a creative a lot of time, and a lot of creative time saved is a lot of money saved for your customer or your specific business. So we can see here, looking at the specifics, my kiwi fruit have been cropped. The background's gone. Similarly, it's honed in this case on my kiwi sign. I'm not sure what it's cutting out from the still processing. Similar with that, our bridge, our watch, our longboat here, and our bike. So that was image cutout. It's a live demo. Something's always going to happen there. Let's have a look at what image marketiveness. And this again may be a sample of Owen trying to throw too much at it at one from my sandbox. But let's have a look at the output anyway and see what we've got. Again, what this does is give you the ability to use that shape and deliver an appropriate crop there. Okay, so we can see based on the content automation features, I've also got a collection of Photoshop actions. We saw the banner one before, right? We've got XMP and ATN files that we've created in Photoshop and loaded in to our AEM assets instance. Okay, so let's quickly recap what's happened there. And notwithstanding, of course, it's a demo, so something's going to happen. I could always select these to reprocess and see what happens. But for our purposes, we've got, I'll come back around to one of the auto tone ones. In my output folder, I can then drill into one of these assets, and I've got different viewers available based on that. Okay, this is dynamic media availability. The renditions, okay, our original that I loaded in. So what it's all done here is not only has it generated new versions of these assets as output, each of these new versions also has applicable dynamic media and smart crop processing applied to it. So in reality, from one asset loaded in, we've generated potentially dozens or even hundreds or thousands of images, and we can apply all this content automation to a specific image, right? You can configure content automation to do this workflow. So what this does is not only does it save the creatives a ton of time, but it creates the best possible asset for the channel that the content owner is wanting to have the end user or company experience on their channel of choice. And of course, it can then be used for personalization. So let's change back to the deck and just recap some of what we've seen. Now, content automation, again, this is for AEM as a cloud service only. It's an add-on to assets. So there is licensing involved here, but what it does is alongside leveraging your creatives, it doesn't replace the creatives. What it does is help automate those repetitive creative tasks that they may spend hours or even days on, depending on the quantity and the amount of work required on static and moving assets that are loaded in. So their work can be replicated automatically and let them focus on their job at hand, which is creating compelling new content for you to use. Here's a quick summary of the functionality that we've seen and is available now with content automation. Okay, again, does require AEM as a cloud service, assets, and we've got these 4 Photoshop action features. Photoshop actions, cut out a mask that you saw. We didn't see replace smart object. That takes a little bit longer to process, but it allows you to load in that PSD file with a highlighted area where you can replace that logo with any other logos you want to do. Lightroom presets, and the 2 auto straighten and auto tone that we had a look at. So what does this mean when we step back at what's required. So the asset foundation is really AEM assets, okay? It's that single source of truth, create once, use everywhere, democratize what was traditionally, in a lot of cases, siloed content and make it available. On top of that, apply AI via Sensei, dynamic media, smart crop, content automation to automatically create all these different versions as assets are loaded in, or we can rerun that at any time manually. That's part of that earlier slide before, where we saw this is a typical process. Now we're replacing a lot of what's in the middle, that backwards and forwards, with an automated process, leveraging the power of dynamic media and Photoshop and Lightroom APIs in the cloud. Last but not least, we've got these great assets. How do we know how they're doing? And that's where, when we had a look at that Asset Insight tab, if there were any info that was collected back from Adobe Analytics, that can show us directly within the familiar AEM Author UI how they're performing. And then we can also leverage additional Adobe solutions such as Target to automatically leverage the assets that are performing best for this segment or this channel, okay? Data drives everything here. We want our assets to perform well, and we don't need to just see the assets in context of a page. We can see which of our renditions or crops performs best and use those. So coming back to the latest building blocks of DAM here. Create. Well, that's kind of what we do. And again, Adobe and non-Adobe solutions. You can drop and store literally any asset type within AEM Assets, and we continue to evolve support for upcoming assets. If you've seen Summit sessions over the last couple of years, you would have seen David Nuschler, for example, look at AR, VI. There's customers that are using this technology now in their experience delivery. Automation here is the new pillar. Automating a lot of what a creative would typically do, or a content owner having to manually do crops. Time saving equals money saving. And again, when you look at the scale in context of maybe what you do for your business or your customers, the amount of time and money that can be saved by automating repetitive processes, leveraging those Lightroom and Photoshop APIs, leverage dynamic media. Yes, dynamic media is also a licensed add-on to assets. Management, that's a core function of AEM Assets. Governance around it. Search and discovery, right? I should be able to search. Let's just pop back over here. I should be able to come to my search bar anywhere I am and search for Kiwi and get a collection of assets returned to me that match that. And again, a lot of them are pretty similar. We've got our Kiwi friends here. And from that, I can then take those assets, filter down, maybe just images, save a smart collection, Kiwi, make it public so my colleagues can see it, save, and I've just created a smart collection. So anything that matches that keyword Kiwi of an image type is now automatically available in that collection, okay? Whoops, PowerPoint again. So this is that evolution that you've seen, creating and sourcing, managing, assembling, automation. That's why it's highlighted in red, leveraging the Creative Cloud Services APIs and dynamic media to allow AEM Assets to be a content generator, not just a content repository. And then, of course, we want you to be able to deliver these assets to any channel you use, Adobe or non-Adobe. And we've got the tools there to help you do so. So content velocity, coming back in summary of that, it's something for everyone. So it saves the creatives time, the marketers, the content owners, the creative directors, project managers, and again, integrating Workfront into that creates that better together story. We acquired Workfront, I think, just over a year ago. People have been integrating assets with Workfront for years, and we continue to refine that integration so that not only integrating with AEM Assets from Workfront, but a direct integration with the creative tools so that the creatives can work on those tasks that are assigned without having to go to another solution to do so. C-level executives, it's easy to measure that ROI for them. IT simplifies it for them because they don't really need to do anything to add this functionality. It's in the cloud and it's available to you now. So the key takeaways really from today, always be thinking content velocity, but this facilitates brand consistency. We've got governance of these assets of any type from a single source of truth, accessed internally, externally, based on my permissions. We respect digital rights management or any expiry. Content velocity improved with these integrations. That includes Workfront, okay, the dynamic media and content automation add-ons. Strategic priorities, that's again where automating repetitive tasks via content automation. Cross-functional collaboration, we can make these collections that I just created available for review via the link share functionality. But it's really about unifying the production management of the work, that's Workfront, and the assets. You just want to be able to deliver personalized experiences in an omni-channel manner at scale based on who's consuming it with the best possible asset. So that's the key takeaways today. We've got around about 5 minutes left. Anything, Kelsey, in the chat, or anyone have any questions? We can make a copy of the presentation available to you as a PDF as well.
Awesome. We do have one question in the chat. It says, can we have optional renditions? Example, we do not need print renditions for all of the images.
Absolutely. So that's a great question. So one thing that I should have called out, so I have been remiss, is that when we talk about dynamic renditions, these are on demand. So if you're familiar with Scene 7, let's just go back to a couple of the ones that I created here. Smart crop, and who are we going to pick on today? Let's pick on our Kia in the snow. So static renditions. So here's our original asset. You saw me load that in, okay? Static renditions are the ones that AEM generates automatically, and they do reside in the AEM repository. Dynamic renditions are just available to be used if they're needed. We do not create a physical new node as part of this image in the repository, but what these dynamic renditions tell the dynamic media servers is these are published out, so that if I get a request in my channel of choice, let's say a web page, a native app, a smart screen, whatever it may be, the rendition I choose will be dynamically generated and then of course can be cached. So when we're looking at this print rendition, these aren't taking up any space in AEM. These dynamic renditions are available. It's the analogy of passing a set of parameters to Scene 7 to get that image back. And again, if we have a look at the URL that's generated, that's exactly what we're doing here, okay? The short answer is no, you don't have to use any of the renditions, but by default, when we're looking at the dynamic media configurations, any image presets that are available will be made available, are available, but they don't have to be used. I hope that helps answer the question. And again, dynamic media servers absolutely do not need to leverage an Adobe End channel. Again, it's just a URL. Here's that Adobe stock image with my print configuration. The dynamic media servers know the print configuration because I configured that in AEM and it's been published out, okay? Similarly with my thin banner smart crop for my kiwi fruit image here. If there's any more questions, again, we've got a couple of minutes left. Thank you for that as well.
Yeah, I think we have about 2 more questions. So one, is there a document or site that lists all available asset transformation options in this package beyond crop, color, profile change, etc.?
Well, we've seen kind of a grouping of multiple functionalities here. So the short answer is yes. And if you're a partner, I'd probably point you firstly to Solution Partner Portal for customers, Experience League, and Smart Crop is one set of functionality, right? I can have as many of those crops as I want that are then available as dynamic renditions. Similarly with dynamic media, and it's probably easier if I just show that, okay? Here's my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 crops that I've configured. The dynamic media ones, again, I always create a print one because it's a good example of a different channel use case. Yes, so looking up AEM assets, cloud service dynamic media will get you that information. Similarly, if you look up AEM assets content automation, and if you do have any difficulty finding that, I can provide some links back, Kelsey, if you're sending out an email with the presentation.
Yep.
Or, as always, by all means, feel free to contact your Adobe account team.
Wonderful. We have another question here. You mentioned that these are available for AEM as a cloud service. Which ones are available for AEM 6.5?
Great question. So content automation, which is leveraging the Photoshop and Lightroom APIs in the cloud, is only available for cloud service. Everything else is available with AEM 6.5 on managed services. And if you manage your own 6.5, you may need to be at a specific server pack level. But again, when we're looking at Smart Crop and Dynamic Media, that is a licensed add-on to any flavor of AEM, as is content automation. So the short answer is content automation is only available as AEM as a cloud service. Other functionality you've seen is available on AEM 6.5 on managed services now, and it will depend on your service pack and licensing for the rest of that dynamic media and smart crop functionality.
I think one more, if we can squeeze it in.
Yeah, lucky last.
Last one is, can we search for similar images within AEM?
Yes, you can. Yep. Now, putting me on the spot here because I haven't done it for a while. But yes, the short answer is you can. Click in here, find similar. So, okay. This is finding, obviously, not the Kia bird, but it's finding alpine. So yes, you can find similar assets there. And this also cascades across if you use Adobe Asset Link to integrate Photoshop directly in here. That functionality is also available by the Asset Link extension in Adobe Photoshop. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Owen. This was a great presentation. Just for everyone, I will be sending out the slides and also the recording so you can share with your teams if they were unable to make it. Make sure to subscribe to the AEM user groups that I linked in the chat so you can stay up to date on all the upcoming user group meetings that are taking place the rest of the month and beyond. So thank you again and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks so much, all. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.